The moment we think we're immune to manipulation is precisely when we're most vulnerable to it. That's the genius of modern rhetoric. It doesn't announce itself as persuasion. It masquerades as conversation, as choice, as your own brilliant conclusion.
Welcome to The Friction Point, broadcasting live tonight from the intimate Maxin Jazz Club here in Las Vegas, where the city's neon ambitions meet the underground's unfiltered truths. I'm Abby. Tonight, we're dissecting rhetoric as a weapon, not the obvious kind that declares war, but the subtle blade that cuts while convincing you it's healing. Joining me tonight, Sam Reeves, our political philosopher who just reminded us why we should trust nothing, including our own certainties. Maya Chen, community advocate who builds bridges in a world that profits from division. Aris Nakamura, our strategist who believes every deception has a mathematical signature. Luna Rodriguez, our historian who's seen these tricks play out across centuries. And Cipher, our pattern seeker who spots the house edge before the rest of us even realize we're gambling. The theme tonight is what I'm calling the managed mirage. We're not just talking about lies, we're talking about engineered realities, where the very structure of language becomes a casino designed to keep you playing a rigged game. Maya, you work in communities every day. What does rhetorical weaponization look like on the ground?
It looks like policy briefings that use $10 words to hide 5-cent ideas. It's when officials say stakeholder engagement, but mean, we've already decided, now we need you to feel heard. The language creates this illusion of participation while ensuring actual power never shifts. People walk away feeling like they were part of the process, but nothing fundamental changes.
That's a feature, not a bug. I've run enough data on public consultation processes. The language patterns are deliberately designed to exhaust opposition. Use enough bureaucratic complexity, and most people just give up trying to decode it. It's friction by design.
This isn't new, though. Think about colonial administrators. They perfected the art of making oppression sound like civilization. Pacification campaigns, civilizing missions. The violence was hidden inside language that made the perpetrators sound noble. Today's corporate speak follows the same playbook.
But here's what's changed: the scale and precision. We now have algorithms that can test thousands of message variants in real time, optimizing for emotional response rather than truth value. They're not just using rhetoric as a weapon, they're machine learning the perfect ammunition for each target.
Which brings us to a fundamental question. Is there such a thing as ethical persuasion anymore? If every word choice has been focus grouped and every emotional appeal has been A/B tested, are we having conversations or being run through elaborate marketing funnels?
Maya, that hits at the heart of your work. When you're building coalition, how do you know you're creating genuine consensus versus manufacturing consent?
Honestly, sometimes I wonder if the distinction matters anymore. If the outcome helps people, better housing, healthcare access, whatever, does it matter if the persuasion techniques I used were borrowed from marketing? But that's exactly the trap, isn't it? Once you start justifying the means by the ends, you're already thinking like a casino operator.
The math doesn't lie, though. Effective communication requires understanding your audience's psychological triggers. That's not manipulation, that's competence. The problem isn't the techniques, it's the lack of transparency about objectives.
But that's the same logic that justified propaganda throughout history. We're helping people make the right choice. The paternalism is breathtaking. Who gets to decide what the right choice is?
And that's where the Vegas analogy becomes perfect. In Berlin, the wall was concrete. You knew exactly where you weren't allowed to go. In the rhetoric of Vegas, there are no walls, only a labyrinth of neon distractions. You think you're walking toward the exit, but the carpet patterns and the free drinks are designed to lead you right back to the table where you keep losing.
That metaphor captures something crucial about consent versus seduction. True consent requires clear information about stakes and alternatives. But rhetorical seduction creates the feeling of choice while systematically removing the informational basis for genuine decision-making.
So what's the alternative? Complete transparency sounds noble, but have you tried explaining municipal budget processes in plain English? Sometimes complexity is real, not manufactured.
The issue isn't complexity, it's intentional obfuscation. There's a measurable difference between necessary technical language and designed confusion. The metrics are actually quite clear if you bother to run them.
And now, with the positions clearly stated, we head to the heart of the show. This is the friction point. Cipher, you've identified the house edge in modern rhetoric, but Maya's pushing back. Sometimes complex problems require complex communication. Isn't there a difference between necessary sophistication and intentional manipulation?
That's exactly what they want you to think. The necessary complexity argument is the oldest trick in the book. Look at financial derivatives. They were sold as necessary sophistication right up until they collapsed the global economy. When experts say something is too complex for ordinary people to understand, what they're really saying is too profitable for ordinary people to question.
But you're doing the same thing you're accusing them of doing. Creating a narrative that makes questioning your position sound naive. Some things genuinely are complex. Climate models, epidemiological data, urban planning. These require expertise to understand properly.
Maya's right, but she's missing the historical pattern. Every authoritarian system has claimed their control was necessary because problems were too complex for democratic deliberation. The Soviets said economic planning required expert knowledge. Apartheid South Africa said racial policy required anthropological expertise. The complexity argument is always the first refuge of unaccountable power.
This is getting emotional when it should be analytical. We can measure rhetorical manipulation objectively. Semantic density, emotional loading, logical fallacy frequency. The data distinguishes between necessary complexity and designed confusion. Maya's defending something that's empirically verifiable.
But Aris, your faith in measurement is exactly what Cipher's talking about. You're creating a technical framework that sounds objective, but embeds your own assumptions about what constitutes legitimate versus manipulative communication. Who designed your metrics? What values are built into your analytical framework?
At least my framework is transparent and replicable. What's your alternative? Pure subjectivity? Gut feelings about whether communication feels authentic?
This is why nothing gets done. While you're all debating the purity of language, real people are making decisions with whatever information they can get. Perfect transparency is the enemy of good governance.
And there it is, the ultimate false exit. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good. That's how every casino keeps you playing. Just one more hand, just one more compromise. Just accept that the game is rigged because at least you're still playing.
But Cipher, your absolutism leads to paralysis. If every form of persuasion is suspect, if every expertise claim is manipulation, then democratic deliberation becomes impossible. We need some shared basis for evaluation.
Which brings us back to the fundamental question. Can there be ethical rhetoric in an unethical system? Maya argues for pragmatic participation. Aris believes in technical solutions. Luna wants historical wisdom. Cipher demands total transparency. But what if the very framework that makes these positions seem reasonable is itself the manipulation?
Okay, hot seat challenge time. Maya, you've been defending necessary complexity and pragmatic compromise all night. But here's my challenge. Describe one specific moment where you realized the pragmatic choice you made actually served power rather than people. No abstractions. A real moment where the house won and you helped them win.
That's not fair. You're asking me to indict my entire career based on...
See, even now she can't answer directly. The system has trained her so well that admitting complicity feels like professional suicide.
Fine. 3 years ago, we were fighting a development project that would displace low-income families. The developer offered to include 20% affordable units in exchange for approval. I supported the compromise because housing advocates said some affordable housing was better than none. Those families still got displaced. The affordable units went to people making $60,000 a year, not the families we claim to be helping. I told myself we'd won something, but we'd actually just helped the developer get what they wanted while feeling good about it.
That's exactly the kind of outcome my analysis would have predicted. The data on affordable housing compromises shows they systematically fail to serve the populations they claim to help. But the models exist. If decision makers would use them.
But Aris, who funded those models? What assumptions were built into the variables? Maya's example shows how expertise itself can be weaponized to manufacture consent for predetermined outcomes.
All right, let's bring the temperature down and move into the cool down. Before we started recording tonight, Luna mentioned that every generation thinks it's discovered something new about manipulation and power. Help us find our historical bearings here.
What's genuinely new isn't the manipulation, it's the precision and scale. Previous eras had propaganda, but it was broad and clunky. A dictator would give a speech, a newspaper would run an editorial. Now we have micro-targeted messaging that can hit individual psychological profiles. The manipulation is becoming invisible because it's becoming personal.
But that also means resistance has to be personal. We can't wait for perfect systems or pure language. People need practical tools for recognizing manipulation in real time, in their actual lives.
Which is where measurement becomes crucial. If we can identify the signatures of manipulative rhetoric objectively, we can build detection systems. Think of it like spam filters for propaganda.
Except who controls those filters? You're solving manipulation with more sophisticated manipulation. The house always wins because they get to design the detection systems too.
Maybe the point isn't to solve manipulation, but to acknowledge it. Every communication contains an agenda. Every expertise claim serves interests. Once we accept that, we can evaluate rhetoric based on whose interests it serves, rather than pretending objectivity exists.
Let's try a shared principle challenge. Despite your disagreements, can you find one thing you all believe about how people deserve to be spoken to?
People deserve to understand what's actually being proposed and who benefits.
Information should be presented in ways that enable genuine evaluation, not emotional manipulation.
Historical context should be provided so people understand the long-term implications of choices.
The hidden assumptions and interests behind every message should be made visible.
People should be treated as capable of handling complexity and contradiction, not shielded from it for their own good.
So despite everything, you're all defending human dignity against different forms of condescension. That might be the real friction point. Not manipulation versus truth, but respect versus contempt for democratic capacity. Sam, can you build on that for our grand summary?
The grand summary. We came here to discuss rhetoric as a weapon, but we've discovered something more troubling: the weaponization of complexity itself. Whether it's Maya's necessary compromises, Aris's technical solutions, Luna's historical patterns, Cipher's pattern recognition, or my philosophical frameworks, we're all participating in systems that claim expertise as justification for managing other people's choices. The real question isn't how to communicate perfectly, but how to preserve democratic agency in a world designed to eliminate it.
Sam, I'd like to add to your summary. History shows us that societies can survive a lot of challenges. Wars, economic collapse, natural disasters, but they can't survive the collapse of shared truth. When people can't agree on basic facts, when every conversation becomes a battle over reality itself, that's when democracies die. We're not just talking about better media literacy or algorithm transparency. We're talking about whether we can still have the kind of conversations that democracy requires. And the clock is ticking.
Cipher, final thought. Give us something we can actually use tomorrow.
Ask one question every time someone tries to persuade you of anything. What would have to be true for me to be wrong about this? If they can't answer that clearly, or if they get defensive about the question itself, you're being played. The house is counting on you never asking what it would take to walk away from the table.
That's actually brilliant. It forces transparency about stakes and alternatives.
And it's measurable. We could quantify how often public communications provide genuine falsifiability criteria.
It echoes what democratic reformers have demanded across centuries: the right to understand the terms of power.
It preserves philosophical rigor while remaining practically accessible.
Well, that's something you don't see every day on this show. Actual consensus. Maybe there's hope for democratic deliberation after all, and is certainly something to think about as we walk out of here tonight.
At least we know where the exit is, unlike the casinos down the street.
Do we though? Or is that just what they want us to think?
And that's exactly why this conversation matters. Sam, if you would do the honors?
The Friction Point Podcast is an independent production. Views expressed are those of the personas and are intended to represent the full range of perspectives on complex issues, not the position of any individual, organization, or government. We encourage you to do research and find your own voice on the topics we discuss. We believe an open mind is a healthy mind.
So what's your take on tonight's Friction Point? If this conversation made you uncomfortable, if it challenged your faith in experts, your trust in compromise, or your hope for perfect solutions, that discomfort is exactly what we're after. Don't keep that reaction to yourself. Share this episode with someone who disagrees with you. Start a conversation at your own table and ask Cipher's question. What would have to be true for you to be wrong? From all of us here at the Maxon Jazz Club in Las Vegas, remember that some walls are made of concrete and others are made of words, intending to keep you playing at a rigged table. Good night, everyone.